Welcome back for the second portion of Joy in Our Town. Thank you for joining us once again. I'm your host, Tammy Johnson. Our guest for this segment is Andrew Stefanik, Infrastructure Protection Manager for the Ohio Department of Public Safety, Division of Homeland Security. He joins us today to address the increasing incidence of scrap metal theft, along with the impact that it has on our economy. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and your position with the Ohio Department of Public Safety and the Division of Homeland Security. What is it that you do?
Well, I started with the division in 2008 as a contractor, and since then I've developed a role within Infrastructure Protection Unit where I'm now the manager for that unit. And we specifically focus on protecting our nation's critical infrastructure, namely, of course, for the state of Ohio. So right now there's 16 different sectors of critical infrastructure. So some of the things that you commonly think of, like say dams, railroads, transportation, also our water sector, water purification units, that is what we're looking at actually protecting. We also work on the Safer School Initiative, which is focusing on school security and safety, as well as the Ohio Scrap Metal Program.
And that's a lot, but we're here to talk about the scrap metal theft. I've heard about it, on and off, but give us an idea and give our viewers an idea, what is scrap metal?
Well, scrap metal could be anything taken from any type of automobile, home, piece of critical infrastructure that can be stolen or taken off that critical infrastructure or automobile or even a home for some kind of potential profit. So when those folks take that, they will remove it, take it over to the scrap metal dealer and turn it in for cash. And it depends on how much in weight and what type of product it is to actually establish the dollar value.
I see. So it's almost like a pawn shop, kind of.
It kind of is, indeed.
Wow. And so obviously this is prevalent here in Central Ohio. Do you have numbers?
Yes, it's very prevalent in Ohio, very pervasive problem. Actually, in 2012 and 2013, the National Insurance Crime Bureau reported Ohio as the highest state in terms of scrap metal theft.
Really?
Indeed.
Why do you think that is?
I think that just because we have a lot of transportation avenues, a lot of interstates, so we have a lot of folks coming in and out of Ohio, just as well as a lot of critical infrastructure around the state. We're a very diverse state, so we have our international border up on Lake Erie with Canada, but we also have, as I mentioned before, a lot of highways going in and out of our neighboring states.
So someone takes this scrap metal and they take it to a place that gives them cash in return for it. The place that they're taking it to, what is that?
That would be a scrap metal dealer. We call them scrap metal businesses.
Okay.
And currently we have about 430 registered dealers throughout the state of Ohio.
Do they have a procedure for accepting stolen property, or how will they know?
They do as of now. February 1st of this year marked the start of the new law where we put the daily transaction reporting database into play. So every time someone goes into a scrap metal dealer, they have to actually submit their ID and make sure that they're not on our do not buy list. And those are folks that have been convicted of a felony or misdemeanor theft.
Wow.
And if they are on that list, they cannot continue with that transaction. If they are able to continue with the transaction, at that point, the dealer then has to take a picture of that individual and of the actual items that they're trying to scrap or sell to the scrap metal dealer.
Nice. Who came up with that?
It was a collaborative unit, I would say, from our Division of Homeland Security, Department of Public Safety, and some other state agencies. We noticed that there was that developing problem, and especially with those numbers that we just discussed in 2012 and 2013, we obviously want to cut that back.
Right. Okay, so the people that are taking the scrap metal, are there any contributing factors? Like, is it a certain population that's doing it? What's the...
Not really. I mean, it's more of a crime of opportunity.
Okay.
So you'll have scrap metal can be anywhere. Like I mentioned before, vacant homes are usually a target that most people think of. Why we got involved at Ohio Homeland Security is basically because we have our critical infrastructure out there that relies on these metal components. But if we, say, have a communications tower out in basically the middle of nowhere, relatively unguarded, it can become a target for scrap metal thieves, and they see that as a potential quick mark for cash.
And that makes a lot of sense. So that's one of the impacts that it have on our community. Are there more? Can you tell us some more?
Yes, I mean, it can be as simple as looking at insurance premiums, because when this theft occurs, just like within your grocery stores or department stores, who ultimately pays that price? It's going to be the end consumer or the folks just trying to pay their bills.
I mean, I know, like I said, I heard about it before, but I didn't realize how big it was. So what is the most type, or what type is stolen most? here
I
in
would
Columbus?
say copper and aluminum are the most commonly stolen metals. And when we think of actual relatable items to that, it could be air conditioner units, something as simple as that in the backyard of someone's property. It's another target of opportunity. If it's not fenced in or something along those lines, you could have scrap metal thieves that are just passing by and say, that's an easy target. A lot of folks will even notice, like when they put their trash out, if there's some sort of metal components, and this happened actually to myself when I put out my grill, it was out there for maybe 10 minutes before a scrapper came over and said, hey, do you mind if I take this? And he actually placed it in the back of his truck and went along his merry way.
Wow. So, I mean, are there the laws that are associated with this crime, is it pretty much cut and dry? Like if someone gets caught, they get charged. It's not like one of those things where it's a secondary crime or anything like that, right?
That's correct.
Is it theft?
It is theft, and depending on the dollar amount and the value, it could be up to a felony. But also with this new law, we are mandating that all dealers must register with the state, and that was effective in 2014.
Okay.
So if a dealer fails to register, they can then be charged with up to a felony of the 5th degree.
That makes a lot of sense. So the ones that are not registered yet, does that mean, with that law being in place now, does that mean that they cannot complete transactions, or does that mean that, you know, they're just kind of like a red flag?
They're a red flag. We'd have to go back and work with our local law enforcement partners, because at the end of the day, we're not the enforcement arm. We're not going to go out and arrest people ourselves. This is something that we work in close collaboration with local law enforcement to make sure they understand the law, and then they can let us know if they made a good arrest.
Wow. So, I mean, and that could be, what you're saying can be bad for business and for personal, like someone with a house or, you know, with a home. So let's start with businesses. What can businesses do to protect their scrap metal?
I would say just remain vigilant and report suspicious activity. It's nice to know that there are a lot of business organizations out there, as well as law enforcement agencies, that freely share information back and forth. This way we can kind of look at trend reporting and see if there's an increase in suspicious activity in a certain area, and then we can increase our patrols or just maybe our extra vigilance with the community in that area, looking out for that specific crime.
And that's awesome, because that's the type of relationship that you have with the law enforcement regarding this issue.
Yes.
Is there any education that's, I mean, you're here on the show, which is wonderful, but is there any other type of education that's, you know, being presented to the community or to businesses about this?
Yes, we've actually conducted a number of workshops already, and we're willing to go out at any time for any law enforcement agency to actually sit down with the officers and work them through the law, to let them know how this all works, what the daily transaction database looks like, because law enforcement does have access to that secure database, as well as any questions on the do not buy list.
Wow. And so now going back to personal, how can people protect themselves from becoming a victim of that crime, especially when you're talking about air conditioners? What other type of things outside that could be a part of that scrap metal?
I would say just be a good neighbor, and kind of with the businesses, it's along the same lines of reporting that suspicious activity, and you especially want to secure your valuables. So if you do leave a lawnmower out, maybe a grill, that does become that target of opportunity that I referenced before. So if there is a way that you can secure it, maybe an extra lock, or you put it into a shed or your garage and just keep your garage closed, those simple steps can really help push that theft elsewhere.
So when you're going out to the communities and you're talking to them about this, what type of things do you tell them? Like what is it that you're presenting? Are you presenting it from a victim standpoint, or are you trying to do like a prevention measure?
Basically prevention measure, but also education. A lot of folks, since it's a new law, don't know too much about it. The actual registry itself came into fruition in 2014, and it wasn't until February of 2015 that we actually had the do not buy list and the daily transaction logs that went into play. So a lot of times when we meet with people for the first time, they're just totally taken aback by that. Oh, the state is actually doing this. And it's a very proactive measure, and I've seen a lot of success within the program. And even in working with the scrap dealers themselves, we're finding out better ways to make this law more applicable to their own business practices.
Right.
So that way, instead of taking an extra 5 or 10 minutes per transaction just to comply with this law, we're actively working with these business owners to make it better, and almost a better transition for them into their daily business lives.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's awesome that you're doing that. I know, you know, when it comes to putting extra stuff on businesses, they kind of shy away from it. Do you find that a lot of businesses here in Columbus or in Ohio, are they compliant?
I would say for the most part, yes. There is that thought of regulation. So when you first see folks looking at this law, when we give our presentation, they're thinking, oh my gosh, here comes, you know.
Another law.
Exactly, and then we're going to have to abide by it. It's going to cost us extra money. But in fact, it's relatively cheap. The registration fees are minimal, and it's done just once a year.
Wow, that's amazing. So, okay, let me ask you this question. Just does this crime pertain to youth too, or is this just like an adult thing?
It can. I think this is one of the few crimes that just goes across the spectrum because it truly is that crime of opportunity. And when we go back to critical infrastructure, I'd really like to emphasize that when folks first hear about this, they really think that it's just the mom and pop's old house that is vacant, right, and that the copper piping is going to be stolen.
But it's not.
No, it affects our daily lives. We could think of telecommunications, you know, our water treatment facilities, our power, which is also another public safety issue because you have folks that are trying to steal cabling from, say, a power station, and they could also be literally hurt or even killed in the process.
And that's what's crazy about that is the people that are doing this, when they get caught, what are some of the consequences for doing this crime?
Well, it could be up to a felony level, so they could look at serious time if they're a repeat offender and the dollar value is that high. But you also have some that remain into that misdemeanor level where they could look at just, you know, maybe 30 days of jail, depending on what type of items they're actually stealing.
And so then when they get on that do not sell to list or do not buy from list, does that mean that they have been charged legally?
That's correct. Okay. To get on that list, you have to have been convicted in the last 3 years for a misdemeanor to actually show up on that list for all the rest of the scrap dealers in the state. Now, if you were charged and convicted of a felony from that a conviction date, you're on that list for 6 years.
Wow.
So we do have that kind of tiered process where if it's a misdemeanor, 3 years, felony would be 6 years on the list.
Wow. Andrew, thank you so much. I mean, you're giving us, like I said, this is a new thing. I mean, I heard about it, but not this in depth. You know, can you give our viewers some basic tips or your contact information to where if they feel like they have been a victim or that they could be, how to secure their home, how would they get in touch with you?
Well, I would first talk to their first responders, local law enforcement, because those are the folks that are actually going to be responding to that and also collecting that data. So when we talk about that trend reporting from before, that's a great place to start, because if you report that suspicious activity, it could be a piece to a larger puzzle that's already at play.
Right.
So that's definitely something I would recommend. As far as contacting us and looking up our information online, we're actually the first Google hit. If you look up Ohio Homeland Security, you'll be able to find that on our website. We do have some publications about scrap metal theft and other programs that we have. We also have a scrap metal training video for law enforcement as well as scrap dealers posted on there. Nice. And you may recognize the voice too.
Wow, Andrew, it's been amazing talking to you about this. Thank you for educating us today and being here. We appreciate you. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. That's our program. Thank you so much for watching. You can also check us out on Facebook at WSFJ-TV51. Join us again next week at the same time for Join Our Town.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and is made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town coming to your home every week. Write to Joy in Our Town, 7790 North Central Drive, Lewis Center, Ohio, 43035.